Well, hello, everybody. Good to have you with us. We'll just skate a couple minutes here while we give people a chance to log on to the webinar. Welcome and season's greetings to everybody. I imagine everybody's getting ready to do the shopping. Not a real big urgency to send Christmas cards because who knows when they're going to arrive because Canada Post. Anyways, we're really excited to have all of you with us today and talking about the Genesis Fertilizer project in Western Canada. My name is Robert Saik. I'll be your moderator. I'm the CEO and founder of AGvisorPRO and VisorPro, and our new company is called T1 Technology Corporation, actually. And my buddy Terry Drabuk said, we'd like to get Genesis Fertilizer on AGvisorPRO. So we established a community, and I encourage you to download AGvisorPRO and join the Genesis community where you can get updates and talk about the Genesis Fertilizer project on AGvisorPRO. So please do that. We have today Jason Mann, and Jason is no stranger to Western Canadian agriculture. He's the president and CEO of Genesis Fertilizer. He leads that company's vision. He also is the CEO of AgriCity and has done a lot of work to do good things for farmers in Western Canada. We're really excited to have Jason with us. We also have Mark Smith with us, and he's the CFO. And Mark's got over 15 years of experience in the chemical manufacturing and finance. I think it's more than that. Previously, he was with Nutrien, where he led the nitrogen division. And now Mark is overseeing $1.5 billion worth of contracts for Genesis. That's billion is a B, billion. That's a big number. Kathy Jordison is with us, and Kathy is on the board of directors with Genesis Fertilizer. She has 25 years, formerly vice president of asset development at Yara. She knows a lot about nitrogen. And as I was doing my diligence on Genesis, one of the things that impressed me so much was the board of directors on Genesis. You've got experience with Nutrien, you've got experience with Yara, you got Ian Craven with MNP, you've got background with Canadian Fertilizer. So Kathy, I'm going to start with you. Why did you decide to come onto the board with Genesis? And let's talk a little bit about the depth of the team at Genesis, Kathy, just to get started with that.
When I came on board in this group, I had been asked to sit on a bunch of other things, but this one very much appeals to me. This is a different direction in the fertilizer industry. You're taking a position that goes directly to farm, but also is a position that's all encompassing. So it not only has your plant, it has your facilities outside that you distribute the product to. So it had a lot of important things that attracted me to it. And as I continue to go through this and we continue to develop the project and do the things, I continue to be more and more fascinated by it, because we are truly spending our time at the board level, making sure that we develop something that's good for the farmers. It's not just good for somebody who's going to corporate entity that's going to make money somewhere else. This is about what benefits the farmer. And we're able to do that because of the people we have on the board. I mean, we've got some very strong people. Garth has been involved in fertilizer, being on the Fertilizer Canada board. And Ian, of course, has been involved in this project for quite a while. So every time we come and discuss something, we bring all this background to our discussion on whatever we need to consider and decide. And that's why you come up with the idea that, yes, we need a product that has sulfur in it, because it'll benefit the farmers. It's not because so much it will be beneficial to the payback on the plant, but it also benefits the farmer. So it's been a lot of those discussions.
Thanks, Kathy. And for all of you that are watching or listening to this, I encourage you to go to the Genesis Fertilizer site, have a look at the board of directors, know that it's an impressive board with deep bench strength. Jason, you guys have been on the road really a lot lately. You've been putting on some heavy miles, but most notably, you just came back from South Korea, where you signed a deal with DL E&C and something called a feed thing came out. Now, this isn't about livestock. This is about a feed agreement. Can you talk a little bit about what that is and who DL E&C is and why it's important, Jason?
Sure. And Rob, just want to thank you for hosting this today as well. Really appreciate that, and my fellow panelists. Yeah, feed. That is this big ambiguous term. It's front end engineering and design. But really, to go back a few steps, we have been pretty busy the last couple of years doing a lot of research, development, planning, selecting technologies. We brought in a world-class in-house engineering team to advise us on the project and what's the best technology, best in class, and lowest risk, et cetera. So over the last number of years, we've been meeting with technology providers, different engineering firms, government agencies, just all across the spectrum to design our project. And the culmination of that is we had a pretty busy November. We were over in Europe with our management team and our engineering team. We met with all of our technology providers that we've selected and had some pretty intense meetings around the alignment of everybody's technology so that it all meshes and there's no gaps in the technology. And then, of course, we had commercial meetings at the same time, negotiating terms of contracts and prices for the licenses that you have to buy to be able to use the technology, then the cost of the engineering, the upfront engineering that layers into this feed. So we were doing all that in Europe with our team, and then and all of our technology providers, and in fact, our selected engineering company that we're using for the feed, which is DL E&C, as you mentioned. Mm-hmm. DL E&C is part of a Korean conglomerate, so it would be in the similar vein as a Samsung or a Hyundai or a Daewoo or LG, for example. So in Korea, you have these large conglomerates that have many different facets of their business. So the one that we're dealing with is DLEM, and they have many divisions. One of them is DL E&C, which is an engineering, procurement, and construction company. So they specialize in detailed engineering, procurement of all of the equipment for a project, and then of course constructing it. So there's not many companies in the world that actually do this and that are specialized in it. We chose DL because they came as a recommendation from one of our technology providers, mm-hmm. and they've had a number of successful projects that they've built in other parts of the world. So they've got a great track record for getting these things built. So we had our meetings in Europe, and DL was there, and then we all headed off to Korea to continue our meetings and negotiating on finalizing more of the contracts and finalizing the terms of our feed contract with DL. So we had those meetings in Korea about 2 weeks ago. We had a signing event in Korea that was hosted by the Canadian Embassy with Ambassador Mahoney, and SAS Trade was there. So hats off to the SAS Trade team for and their office. They have an office in Japan, and they look after Asia, and they set this all up with the Canadian Embassy and came over from Japan and were there for the signing. So it was a great event, and we're just really excited to have DL on board. They're going to do just a really great job for us. I could go on forever, but I'll probably just
So this is a big deal, Mark. You're a CFO of this project, and the numbers are big. I mean, we're talking multi-billion-dollar project. You're over there. These folks that you signed with just don't put their names on any project. Like, as much as you chose them, Jason, they had to choose you. And Mark, can you comment a little bit about the gravitas or how important this is for Genesis?
And yeah, absolutely, Rob. And just a correction on the introduction you gave me. You gave me the credit of running nitrogen business inside Nutrien. I was actually the finance lead for the nitrogen business inside Nutrien.
Again, corrected.
So just
okay.
Yeah, it's important to have strong partners. So what we've been doing here is taking a low risk approach to our technology choices and our choices of construction company. And we believe we've made that low risk approach with DL E&C. We're recommended by one of our technology partners, but our engineering group also have a good experience. As Jason mentioned, they've done this many times over. So they've built ammonia plants, which is the front end of our plant. They've built that in Saudi. They've actually built the 3 biggest in the world in the Saudi. So it was important that we made a choice, a low risk choice on the construction side. But also, of course, it's important that they saw our project and they assessed the credibility of our project. You know, it was a big deal when they looked at us, they asked us questions about our plan, about our financing, and it's a big deal when they say, yeah, we're in. So yeah, indeed, it was really important.
So the credibility side is, you know, we're going to get into this a little bit because we're going to talk about PwC here with you, Mark. Kathy, back to you. You said something earlier about the project, the Genesis Fertilizer project, that it is different because of the involvement of farmers and the opportunity for farmers to be involved, you know, as investors, but also as the off-takers of the product. You mentioned ammonium or urea ammonium sulfate. We'll talk about that in a bit. But Kathy, can you talk a little bit about why it's important for the structure of the company, the way that you guys have structured it, for farmers to have the opportunity to invest? Because this has been a conversation I've had with a lot of farmers.
I think if it's a farmer investment level, you get a project that's more geared to the Western Canadian economy and farmers. I mean, there's no doubt that we need more nitrogen in our industry in Western Canada and in the Northern Plains. It keeps growing. And every time we build another canola crushing facility, it's going to grow more because we're putting more canola into the ground. So it's important that the farmers start to get some kind of control over the nitrogen market. It's always the market that they end up spending probably consistently the most money, because you can farm P&K out of the soil, but you can't farm nitrogen. Every year they have to put nitrogen down. So it's the one that's in most demand. And as long as we're pricing it on imports, it kind of allows our industry in Western Canada to float with outside external pressures. And to start to alleviate that would help the farmers.
So Kathy, the farmers will invest. They will take the nitrogen and the urea ammonium sulfate from the Genesis plant, and their benefit really as shareholders is going to be the ROI. And when you look at and I looked at a lot of the numbers in terms of the prospectus. When you look at the price of natural gas and you look at the price of urea fertilizer and you look at the price of freight and everything like that, this does make sense as an investment, Kathy, for farmers, doesn't it?
Yes, it does, very much so. When you look at a plant like this, now you're talking about the billions it costs to build it. Yara spent 1.6 billion to buy the existing one at Belle Plaine. That plant there, I was on the group that sold it. I was in charge of selling the marketing and sales side of it. We had no problem getting that money for that plant. The next bid to is 1.4 billion. I mean, these plants are worth a lot of money and they generate a lot of money. So for a farmer, your benefit is you invest in it, you get your product, but also you get the return on the investment afterwards. And the return on investment of these plants are amazing. Even back when natural gas was $12, $15 a ton, that plant at Belle Plaine made money for its investors.
Yeah. So I'm going to shift over to Jason again. One of the key components of the Genesis Fertilizer project, Jason, has been the relatively new signing with Carbon Co. to create a carbon capture. So we're talking about an ammonia facility here, Haber-Bosch, and it produces a lot of carbon dioxide. But something just happened in the last little while that's very, very important for the Genesis project. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah, and I just want to put a pin in what Mark was saying about DL doing their due diligence on our project, and when you're doing this feed, that front end engineering and design, which includes that carbon capture, they don't want to work on projects if they don't think there's a likelihood of success. They don't want to do the feed because that's just so small potatoes. They want to do the feed and get to the actual billions of dollar project, not just do the $50 million feed contract. So there's that analysis that they've done. Yeah. Now talking about carbon capture, I think it's unrealistic today to say you're going to build a plant that emits and you're not going to deal with your emissions. I just don't think that's viable today. Not to say we couldn't just build a gray emitting fertilizer plant. We could, but you know, then we're emitting a lot of CO2. So we're fortunate on the location of our plant, because at Belle Plaine, you know, the provincial government has said they want to make this a carbon hub in Saskatchewan, or a hydrogen hub. And just by happenstance, Whitecap Resources is putting in a carbon sequestration facility right near our project. So what that means is they will, whatever carbon or CO2 we capture, they will transport it and sequester it underground permanently. And that's what you need to actually do carbon capture. You have to be able to capture the carbon, and then you need to be able to store it. So back to your question around the big news for us is yes, we are going ahead with carbon capture on the plant. That is in our design. It so happens that DL's sister company, Carbon Co., also out of Korea, has had carbon capture technology that they've deployed for more than 10 years. So they have a lot of experience and the knowledge of building and designing carbon capture plants. So we will be using their technology on our plant, and we'll be capturing 95% of the plant's emissions. We'll be capturing and sequestering, and we are working with Whitecap Resources to sequester that underground permanently. So we'll be capturing about 2,000 tons a day, or 700,000 tons a year of CO2. So that's a big deal.
Okay, so as a farmer, you know, I need urea. I need the products that Genesis Fertilizer is going to produce. So you have this carbon sequestration pipeline going past Belle Plaine for the Genesis Fertilizer plant, and you're going to sequester all this carbon, and you know, you have you're going to produce a much greener urea, much greener ammonia than other plants. What difference does it make to a farmer?
Yeah, I think it makes a real big difference. Well, first of all, we've seen where nitrogen fertilizer has a big target on its back for emissions. And we've seen some stuff in a few years ago where the federal government was trying to limit the amount of nitrogen you could use and things like that. So, you know, we're producing urea, and to make urea, you do need CO2. So you cannot get away with some of the emissions you're going to have from the urea, because as it breaks down and the plant takes up the nitrogen, you're going to have some CO2 gassing off. But we're collecting all the other CO2 in the plant and sequestering it. So what does it mean for a farmer? Well, the fertilizer that they're buying from Genesis has a lower carbon intensity than fertilizer produced at any other plant in Canada, for sure, because none of them are doing carbon capture. So a farmer can now have lower carbon intensity fertilizer on their farm, which thereby means that any production that they're producing off with that fertilizer is also lower carbon. And so you could potentially have low carbon grain. And we know there's food companies out there that are paying for low carbon grain.
Well, I mean, we're getting down a bit of a rabbit hole here, but when you look at what's going on around the world right now, you got scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 emissions that companies are tracking. And I believe you're exactly right. If a farmer can prove that he or she is using lower carbon footprint fertilizers, that goes a long way. Dr. Bennon just asked, will the carbon capture come with incentives for Genesis? And I think that, Mark, I'm going to ask you to talk a little bit about that. If there's any questions, just throw them in the Q&A, and I'll lob them into the panel here. Mark, from a standpoint of, I don't think you guys are building carbon incentives. That would be more like icing on the cake. Am I right on that, Mark?
Well, so we spent quite a bit of time when we had the development of Whitecap Resources and the opportunity to sequester. The federal government came out with Bill C-59, C-69, which were motivating clean hydrogen and decarbonization efforts. So we spent quite a bit of time looking at the design of our plant and also what those bills may well provide to us. So we will be receiving some capital support from the federal government, and also the provincial government are also trying to motivate some decarbonization. So there's certainly support available, and we're progressing with that. And then when you have your CO2, so because we're sequestering some CO2, we will have allowances. So we'll have excess allowances that we can then sell into the market. So there's a double benefit of doing that over and above just doing the right thing. I think where Jason started, building a grey fertilizer plant is probably not the right thing to do just at this point. And I guess just wanted to add something to what Jason was saying about we're in market here, right? So the fertilizer is going to get used in Western Canada, and at the moment North America is short urea, so we're also displacing imported tons. And those imported tons of urea, they're coming from the Middle East, they're coming from China, they're coming from Russia. So when you look at the carbon intensity and the benefit, you're displacing urea that's got a lot of air miles on it.
Okay, well, that helps to clarify a little bit around the opportunity that Genesis Fertilizer has with carbon capture, but also the reasons why it's important. Of course, if you could have urea produced with a lower carbon footprint, why wouldn't you do that? This opportunity is pretty big. And maybe I did have a carbon company founded in 2007. This market continues to develop and stuff. Mark, back to you again. I want you to talk a little bit about some of the people and some of the companies. Kathy's talked about some of the board member people, but I'd like you to talk about some of the companies that are involved with the Genesis Fertilizer project, notably PwC and what that means.
Yes, thanks, Rob. So, I mean, we're trying to take a low risk approach, on the technology side, on the engineering side. Of course, there's now a big effort in terms of financing. And what we wanted was a strong partner for financing. So back in sort of end of Q1, Q2, so March, April, May time, we went out to look for a financial advisor. We screened a number. So we went to talk to a number of banks that you'll recognize on the high street. So they're Toronto offices. And in the end, we've appointed PwC. And we're really delighted at that. So there's a very strong project finance team who've been involved in this kind of venture to try to help finance these big infrastructure projects. So we've got a very strong team in PwC helping us there, and they'll help us create a banking syndicate. So there will be debt in this project alongside the farmers' equity. So we believe there'll be a syndicate and there'll be a lead bank that will be appointed for that syndicate. The lead bank would ideally know about agriculture. So they understand the market. They understand the market either downstream into the farming side or fertilizer. And they would do much of the due diligence for a syndicate of banks because it won't be one bank who's lending. There's also the opportunity of government banks also in this. So they'll help us navigate our way through that. And also alongside the farm investor, we also anticipate there'll be some strategic investment. So other companies who see some synergy and some benefit aligned with this goal. So we spent some time deciding our partner, a company that would really be an advocate for us, a real partner, shoulder to shoulder. And we appointed PwC, and we're really delighted that they joined us. And again, like Jason was saying about DL, they also don't want to be attached to a project that's not going to go forwards. So it's also a vote of confidence. They had a look at us, they kicked the tires, and they said, yep, we're in.
Well, this is, I think, significant. I mean, again, a lot of farmers, I'm looking at the list of people attending here. I see a lot of names, a lot of farmers on here that I know, and I'm glad you guys are on the call. From a standpoint of setting up the structure of the company, you created a model where farmers can invest, and I want to drill in on this a little bit more. Building a urea plant is profitable. You could probably finance this without the roadshow of trying to get farmers on board. Why include the opportunity for farmers to invest in this? I mean, this has been something that has come up over and over in the discussions I've had regarding the Genesis project.
Right. Okay. Well, at heart, I'm a farmer. I'm not spending a lot of time on the combine or the tractor anymore, but my roots are farming. Basically, whatever our team does every day, day in, day out, is for the farmer. Everything, all my decisions that I take is what can we do that's better for Western Canadian or Canadian agriculture. So to me, this project just makes sense for farmers. This is a better thing than buying more land. It's just the right thing for a farm to do. So we're trying to set the table for farmers to come to the buffet here and enjoy the profits of this project. It's a big project, and no getting around it. It's a $2 billion project. There's a lot of moving parts, but it's no different than how do you eat an elephant? It's one bite at a time. And we know what we're doing. We're doing all the right things. Location on the land, all the interactions with all the government agencies, making sure we have water supply, gas supply, electrical supply, permitting, environmental, the basis of design of the plant, and making sure we've got the right the product configuration, choosing the right technology partners, the right EPC, and trying to, I'll bring that back to local, because we've got PCL that's also working on the project, and they'll be assisting in the feed with DL. And that's important, because that gives a local, because people say,
So,
what is
so PCL, a well-known Canadian company, going to be doing the construction?
Well, yes, I suppose once we get to construction, that's that's not announced or anything, but I'm sure things are in the works there for sure. And there's collaboration between DL and PCL, certainly on the feed. And the feed is important because it is a big ticket to get the feed done. And but if you don't do the feed, you're not doing your project right. We want to know what our costs are and understand any weaknesses as you're moving along, because you solve all those through the feed. So by the time you're done the feed, you've got a good indication of what your final price is. You know where you're getting all your equipment from. You've got quotes on a lot of it, and you're ready to get to your financial investment decision and get a shovel in the ground. So why do we set it up this way? We want this to be a farmer's project. It should be a farmer's project. They use the nitrogen every year anyways. Why not buy from yourself and participate in all those profits? Have your surety of supply, because we seen what happened in 2022 when Russia invaded Ukraine. It doesn't take much of a supply imbalance, and all of a sudden the price shoots up from $600 to $1,300. And who pays for it? The farmer pays for it, and they have no power at all. So why not get involved, own your production, own your tons, and be the master of your destiny? And it's a better investment than anything else you can do on farm regardless.
Well, certainly the ROI looks good from what I have studied. Mark, from a standpoint of a timeline, it's not something that's just going to happen overnight. It is a multi-billion-dollar project, Mark. And what is in your mind the horizon? We've got to get this, I guess you call it the front-end engineering and design study, done first. But from a standpoint of laying out the finances, Mark, and looking at, when do you think the first kind of, when do you think, just talk about timeline, Mark. Sorry.
Yeah, so Rob, so we've got the feed. That was an important step to sign that, and the associated technology agreements. That is due to finish in the first quarter of 2026. And the idea is in 2025, it's a big year for financing. So it's a big year to get our bank syndicate in place and the strategic investors in place. So when the feed is done, what we anticipate at the end of that is that our cost estimate, the 2.3 billion, is confirmed through that process, and it's going to take 3 years to build the plant. And then our view at this point in time is that then we'll start construction pretty much second half of 26. It's a 3-year plan. So then we'll finish that in 2029 and then commission. So that's the sort of rough timeline. And of course, once the plant has started construction, then throughout that period, we'll then be building out the distribution. So we've got the 7 super centers, one built already in Belle Plaine, and the other ones, we know where they are. In most cases, we know where they are, and we've got options on land. So we're ready to build. And of course, you can phase those in as you're building the chemical plant. So it's, as I say, feed finishing Q1 26, shovels in the ground, second half of 26, plant ready and running second half of 29.
Question came in, Jason, about Whitecap. Who are the investors in Whitecap? What happens if that doesn't happen? What's the word with Whitecap?
Whitecap is publicly traded, so you can just Google them and look at their stock. They are, they have a lot of holdings down in the Weyburn area. So they've been doing a lot of gas or oil production using where they inject CO2 into the ground and that helps push out. It's like another type of fracking where they push out the oil when they put CO2 down, and that pushes the oil out of the ground. So they've got a lot of experience in this carbon sequestration. It's called enhanced oil recovery, EOR. And so they're going to take what their know-how there, which that facility they run in Weyburn's been around for 40 years.
Okay.
So they're taking that know-how, and they've permitted another location near Belle Plaine as a CO2 sequestering site, and that's government permitted already. Government of Saskatchewan, they've got their permits there. They've got their defined aquifer that they're going to inject into, and all they have left to do is to build the pipeline. And it's not far, because from Belle Plaine to that site's like less than 20 miles.
Okay.
And location again.
Okay, so Dr. Bennon again came through here with a question that I'm going to throw for Mark while we got you on here. Are there any offtake agreements for Western Canadian farmers, any export considerations for the Genesis plant in terms of export fertilizer, exporting?
Yeah, so I mean, I guess just covering a little bit the last question about isn't there enough fertilizer in Western Canada? We see that North America, so US and Canada, is short. There's 16 million tons of urea that's consumed in North America, and 6 million of those are imported, and they come through New Orleans and come out of the Middle East and China and Russia. So, so we're principally displacing those tons. Where the plant is, we can clearly access the US fairly easily. And the idea of having the farm investor is that our owners will have the offtake. So our owners will be motivated to have the offtake off of their own plant. And that's also why we want the farm investor there. So so that's that's that consideration. So we can export. We can certainly export urea. We have planned to export diesel exhaust fluid. So part of our configuration is diesel exhaust fluid. And the bigger market there is the US. That's a 5 million ton market today, and it grows to 8 million tons as certain industries have exemptions that run out. So they have to start using diesel exhaust fluid. I think people will probably recognize that as it reduces NOx, and in your diesel vehicles, you need to have that as an additive. So it's like AdBlue, I think, is one of the trade names are there. So we're quite conscious of exporting, because that also gives us access to one of the government banks. EDC will give us also funding if we're exporting.
So Jason, he just said something interesting there in terms of the projected products coming from the Genesis fertilizer plant. You have urea, you have I think it's urea ammonium sulfate that you're looking at, and DEF. He just talked about that. Ammonia is the first thing coming off the plant, but ammonia doesn't figure really big into the equation. I mean, it does as a precursor, but that's not, you're not building per se an ammonia plant to sell anhydrous ammonia. That's right.
We just don't want to. Well, I think the use of NH3 is declining, and there's a lot of risk in handling that, and the infrastructure required to move that around, and applications, etc. So no, our focus is urea, and because of the sulfur deficiencies we have and the demand on sulfur, we took a hard look at would it make sense for us to augment our production by including sulfur, and it does. So our design is to, a lot of farmers buy urea and then they buy ammonium sulfate and they blend them or they'll buy their ammonium sulfate separate, they'll top dress it or whatever they'll do. We're going to make a homogeneous granule that's urea with ammonium sulfate in it. So it's like going to be like a 39005.5, something like this, right? In that neighborhood.
3900 what?
5.5.
5.5
around this.
Yeah, that particular product from an agronomic standpoint is really good. That's a good stable product. And then the DEF that's going to be produced, a big market for DEF, of course. Farmers love DEF,
Yeah, I bet they do. Yeah, but we've got to we've designed the plant to like squeeze every drop out of it. So basically, it's linear when you're producing our 1,500 ton a day front end ammonia. That then equates to, you multiply by 1.6, gives you 2,500 tons a day of urea. So we've got a 1,500 ton a day front end ammonia plant.
Yep.
That's then going to make 2,500 tons a day of urea synthesis. And when I say urea synthesis, that's where you're taking the ammonia, mixing it with the CO2, and you get this kind of like a paste. We'll call it almost like Elmer's glue, I guess you could say. And so this urea synthesis then would go, if you were just making urea, that would be linear, and you'd have 25 tons of urea synthesis, and that would just go straight into the granulator, and you would make 2,500 tons a day of urea granules, right? So we're going to run in campaigns. So some days that's what we'll be doing. We'll be making 2,500 tons a day of granular urea. But other days when we're making urea ammonium sulfate, we will be buying ammonium sulfate and introducing it into our system. So we'll be taking 2,000 tons of urea synthesis, approximately, and then we'll be adding in 400 to 500 tons of ammonium sulfate that we grind up, and we introduce it into that hot urea melt, that Elmer's glue looking stuff. That gets mixed and then gets put into the granulator to make this homogeneous urea ammonium sulfate granule. So then we have this 500 tons a day of extra urea synthesis sitting there, and that we're going to make DEF out of. So basically, diesel exhaust fluid is 1 part urea, 2 parts water.
So when you're producing urea, 2,500 tons a day, when you're producing urea ammonium sulfate, 2,000, and then you use the rest for DEF.
Yeah, so on the days we're doing urea ammonium sulfate, we're doing 2,500 tons of granulated fertilizer, even a little bit more, but we're also doing all these DEF tons. So it's just an add-on to the plant that is highly profitable and just adds to the output of the plant.
I just want to lob this out because we have a question about investment, and what is the minimum investment that you're looking for? I'm not sure who wants to answer this, and I have talked to some farmers, from what I know anyways, in terms of the initial investment, which is basically your at-risk capital, and then the next step, which is the full investment. Who wants to, Mark or Jason? Do you want to take that?
I can talk to it a little bit. I mean, I'm not licensed to sell investment, but just generally, we're trying to have farmers being the largest equity holder, majority owned equity by farmers. So the investment for a farmer is really, you can invest as an off taker. So you understand that you maybe need 300 tons a year in your farm. So you can invest, kind of do a calculation as to what that would cost on the investment to get you about this equivalent to 300 tons of use of product. Or you can invest as a strategic investor if you don't want any offtake. Of course, our preference is to have farmers invest that want offtake. And
now you said something just a second ago. You're not licensed to do the investment, but so how are you handling that? Who's handling that?
So and I'll probably let Mark chime in on this, but Access Capital is our exempt market dealer, because this is all done under securities. So I have no qualification to sell an investment, because it's a process that needs to be done properly, and there's a lot of scrutiny on how those investments are done and oversight, and I really
that's important. At the Red Deer event that we had, Mark, we talked about Access Capital, the fact that the money doesn't go to Genesis, it goes to it goes in escrow. So can you talk about that, Mark?
Yeah, that's right. It's an exempt market placement, so it's important that the compliance is done correctly. So that's managed through Access Capital. So when people sign up, they're signing up through Access Capital for a Genesis investment, and they are checking the credentials of the investor within that process, and then they become a unit holder of Genesis Fertilizer. And as Jason mentioned, and neither am I able to talk about investments. So I'm not here to talk about the structure of that, or indeed, we're not exempt market traders, or exempt market dealers rather. So it's managed through that process. Access Capital manage these kind of capital raises for businesses. So they've been in the business for quite some time. And at one point, the company needed to have a company to organize that compliance. And people that may have come to our town hall meetings, we've often had the Access Capital guys come to those town halls so they understand the compliance part of that.
So that was made clear to me at the Red Deer event that we had, where these folks, Access Capital, is where they handle the accreditation of the investors. They handle all that stuff. So this is, again, another step, a layer of the onion that I'm learning as I'm, involved as AGvisorPRO. And please download the app and join the Genesis community. But this is another piece of the puzzle that when you start to look at how this thing has been structured, the logos that are around the project, the engineering that's going into the project, the numbers in terms of ROI coming from the project, and the fact that, you encourage farmers to have off-farm investment. Well, this is an off-farm investment that directly benefits the farm. In the chat right now, you can go and click on that link, which will give you access to the AGvisorPRO community on the Genesis community and AGvisorPRO. Mark, do you want to wrap up with some comments here? If there's any questions coming in, I will look at them on the Q&A. So if you got something, hit me now. Mark, as you're summarizing this webinar for the people in attendance, what are the take-home messages from you?
Yeah, I always look at almost like a jigsaw set. It's like we've got good advisors, we've made good decisions about technology, we've made decision about the feed, maybe leading to the EPC. We've got a financial advisor on board. We've got the exempt market placement, which has been running for quite some time. And I always look at the jigsaw pieces of this. That almost all the jigsaw pieces are in place. We still have to build a plant, right? We still have to raise the finance, and we still have to build a plant. And as Jason said, we've got a very experienced engineering team. We've made good choices on technology. We're planning to make very good choices on the EPC to de-risk this. But it looks like almost all the jigsaw pieces are in place for this project, which I think is really encouraging.
I get excited about the project for Western Canada. I know that over time, as our yields go up, the demand for nitrogen is not going to subside, and it'll be great to have a low carbon footprint nitrogen. Jason, a final word to you as I'm looking at the questions here. I think there's a question around carbon intensity of the project, of the products. It'll be a low carbon intensity nitrogen that's produced here, a low carbon intensity urea. As you're wrapping up, Jason, what are your comments? Why should farmers invest with you?
Yeah, and just to go to that point on low carbon, we'll be able to write a protocol that will be so solid on what the actual carbon reduction is. It should make that more valuable than, say, a cover crop or some other things that are a little bit less tangible. We got actual numbers we can work with. Say we've sequestered exactly this much CO2, and we've reduced your CO2 by exactly this much. So there's going to be a lot of interesting things there, but that can go a few different ways depending how we figure how to best monetize that for the farmers. But
one question just came in, Jason. Is there loans available for farmers to invest?
We're looking into that because we think that could be interesting. If we thought that there was enough, if farmers were looking for that, it's just to make it easier for them to invest, so they don't have the hassle of, they can just, if there's sort of a setup, a program. We're actually looking into that now. So stay tuned on that. I just want to say this project is a great project. There's just so many good things about it. I just want to thank the investors that have come forward already and put their money in and supported us and trust what we're doing. We really appreciate it. And we take it very seriously, how we manage your money to get this project across the finish line. So I'm kind of humbled by the amount of support we've got so far, and I'm very, very appreciative.
Well, I want to thank everybody for being on the webinar today. We had a really good turnout today. This particular webinar will be turned into a podcast that you guys can share with other people who have questions around the Genesis Fertilizer project. As I have shared, my personal experience is that the deeper I go in learning about the project, the more impressed I am with the people and the companies around it. So thank you for being part of the AGvisor pod. Please download AGvisorPRO on your iOS or Android. Join the Genesis community, ask questions. That's what we built AGvisorPRO to do. And we're happy to be able to work with companies like Genesis Fertilizer. Kathy and Jason and Mark, thank you for being here. And we will catch you on the hot, dusty trails of Western Canada. Everybody take care, and Merry Christmas to you all, and Happy New Year.
Thanks, Rob.
Thank you, Rob.